here if I can. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. Just want to extend a thanks again to Pietro and Ben. This is an incredible gathering of people and tough acts to follow. So I'm going to talk about nothing so expensive as everyone else has. I've been working, I mentioned, on content management systems, mostly text. I haven't been doing a lot of sort of audio and video stuff recently. But one of the things that we've found is as systems have gotten more complicated, as the things that we're trying to do in the web publishing space get more complicated, some of the tools that we've been relying on for a long time are starting to show their age. So I wanted to talk about killing Markdown and killing markup, for that matter. So just a little bit of history here. Who here knows Markdown? So pretty much everyone. So this looks a lot like Markdown, right? It's like, we've got a header, paragraph, ordered list, etc. It's a little bit different from Markdown, but it's not Markdown. It's GML. It was written in 1969. GML was an IBM project to essentially write text into files in ways that could be output for computers to display and print in better formatted ways. GML gave birth to SGML, which was the standardized generalized markup language, which in turn gave birth to both HTML and XML. HTML eventually became Markdown again. And XML, sort of through a process of alien abduction, nowadays is like JSON, kind of. But I think, when we reflect on this, our tools are based on a couple of really basic assumptions that aren't correct anymore. So, this formatting, this simple formatting, was premised on think about how powerful or not computers of 1969 were. Just getting text into a file was a hard challenge, and then taking that and outputting it and formatting it into something for a printer was a new problem, right? It's something that no one had ever dealt with before. So now we've lived through the explosion of online publishing. And one of the things that I think people in this room understand more than anyone else, but I think more people are beginning to realize this, is that content is not hierarchical. We don't have this strict hierarchical model of content that HTML and XML kind of give us. So this idea that everything that we can express, we can just do with a series of enclosing tags. And I think that assumption that we've made, that we proceed with, is really limiting. And I think overall, I just want to take a little bit of time for this room to reflect on. HTML has enabled a huge amount of amazing things. It allows us to do everything on the web, and that conceptual model has gone a long way. I think a lot of the experiments that were talked about earlier are really pushing the boundaries of what we can do with HTML. And I think one of the things that this room could come out with is a better mental model for how we think about content. And because there's this challenge, we can write code that does this, but it's not reproducible, and it doesn't give us a generalized mental model for thinking about things. So I'm just going to go through some of these ideas. So yeah, cool story. Content is hierarchical. Here's my favorite example of non-hierarchical content. So this is edits on The Wasteland. Mark that up in HTML. it's a disaster, right? Like the content is the printed text. Everything else is edits for Eliot by other people, multiple people, and it doesn't fit into this shape. So I spent basically the last 5 years of my life working on a project called Poetica, which was an online collaborative editor where we were basically trying to enable this on the web. And that raised some really interesting problems. Turns out it wasn't a 2-week open source hack. It was a lot harder than we thought. And I think, you know, we have this idea now that for responsive design, we can just take the content and flow it into whichever container we want. But the reality is that content is more like a liquid, and some liquids are different from others, and we need sometimes the component parts to be able to reason about what we're doing. So like, if you want to, this analogy is a little bit stretched, but you know, like coffee, we take beans, we grind them, we brew the coffee, and then we pour it into the container. You can't just say, I can make coffee into water by pouring it into a different container, right? Like it's this hard metaphor. So this is, I'm just going to dive into how we approach this problem. Really as a way, I don't have any answers, the spoiler alert, but I think just as a way to give you guys a framework for sort of thinking about how you might approach it. So we essentially, we took the content and we got rid of HTML to start. I mean, we still use it for like presentation, but essentially we moved the content just to a JSON object, and then the key thing here is that we moved all of the stuff that you would normally put into HTML into annotations. So it's very similar to what everyone here is doing, but if we want an unordered list, we just say the unordered list starts at position 29, covers that text. If we want some bold text, starts at position 19, covers that text. And if we want a comment, it starts at position 28 and covers that text. And here's the comment, and it's just some arbitrary metadata. And so this is the rendered output. But you can see that these things all overlap. And so to represent that in HTML would have been basically impossible. For us, approaching it this way was essential because of change control, revision control. So we wanted to be able to handle changes to the underlying content. It wasn't static. So, you know, if you've ever gotten into a complex Git conflict situation, you'll know very intimately what I'm talking about. So here's this, this is just a zoomed in view of the JSON. If I want to add some text, so I've added changes, all I do here is add some numbers to the positions. So it's a really simple model. It gets more complicated, but this would have been impossible in 1969. Like they just didn't have the tools to even consider thinking about doing something like this in an efficient, fast way. But now we're doing, you know, the demos earlier are doing basically this kind of thing with way more complicated structures. But I think we haven't quite taken a step back to think about what that means in general. So I mocked this up. I'm pretty much done. But I mocked this up in preparing for this, and this is actually taken straight out of Chris's Git repo and just reformatted a little. But essentially, so as a thought experiment, we have a document that has a transcript and some audio. And then the annotations, not sure if this is going to be easy to explain, but basically, so they have a start point and an end point. And the start point against the transcript, which is the text, is 0. And against the audio, it's this. And the end point, the transcript, it ends at the end of the transcript and at the end of the audio. And then for a word, so I've just included one word in here, obviously, to keep it simple. But the word starts at position 0 and goes to position 2. So the word is in, and we've included that here. and then the audio is from 0.04 seconds to 0.18 seconds. Now the interesting thing here is that if we modify the text, like if we add something at the beginning of the text, we have a really simple way of adjusting the annotations without sort of munging everything. And the same thing is true of the audio. So if we mix something into the original audio file, we can adjust the offset. So everything is sort of independent, but like acts as an augmented approach to this. So that's the last slide I have. But I think, conceptually for where what we're doing in publishing, this model gives us the ability to really be adaptive in what we display. So a lot of the stuff that, Chris and Dan and Mark were talking about earlier, like a lot of those possibilities become really easy to reason about, because you can filter, you can mix in different components, and rendering it out to HTML, which I've come to think of more like PDF than the sort of promised semantic wonderland. I think that this model works really well for that. This is just an example of what this could look like. I think this is something that we need to hash out. I'm allergic to standards now. I've done too many, so I won't call it a standard. But I just want to say, like, as the next few days are going, keep this in mind. Try where you can to extract sort of common approaches to things, because I think the work that's being done here is some of the most interesting stuff, I think, on the internet right now, and will enable so many things to happen. And if we can get it right in terms of constructing a shared mental model, it'll extend beyond this room to the millions of people who create stuff for the web now. So that's everything. I think I'm standing in the way of lunch, maybe. So no, okay. Yeah. Just a character, yeah. So just a.
So it's not for example, the quotation mark. It's the capital I.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
Because depending on if you get out of that angle from the world, it's actually like
Yeah. So I think.
So the word is actually.
Yeah, the way that we've approached it is very much character based, and around Unicode. Like the text stuff has been pretty well solved. One of the things that I do like about so in thinking about this stuff, I was like, there's a bunch of different approaches that are quite challenging. But recently, I sort of had the realization. You guys know this already, but if the annotation is against a video, then is it frames or is it seconds? But you can sort of decide that, and as long as you agree on where the annotation sort of is positioned against, this model basically applies to anything. So we're looking at doing really complicated, like essentially layouts of archival representations of our old InDesign layouts that we can do in this way, because you can kind of encode everything in it. So.
Hey, sorry, just real quickly. I love it, and also the question I had, because I'm thinking in terms of what I was describing before, which is we would love to basically execute something like this on top of our content, but have lots of different sources of those annotations.
Yeah.
And so source isn't captured there. I'm also, and another thing not captured there is the time it was added. And I wonder, are there things like that? Was that a conscious decision to not include, or?
So this is.
I know it's not a standard. So.
Yes. So this is actually just a massively simplified, just to fit on a slide, basically.
Okay.
All of that stuff can be included. One of the nice things about the annotation model, which you guys know, is that you can mix in and out, like you can filter and add annotations as long as you're talking about the same thing. So if I have, you know, commentary, like a commentary track, there's no reason that the commentary track shouldn't be aligned to the original content, but you shouldn't need to duplicate the original content in order to add the commentary. But you might not want to include it in every document, and so you can just insert into essentially this array.
Thanks.
Cool. Cool. Thank you very much.
So we can take a 15-minute break for everyone to stretch. Then we're gonna have a quick session before lunch. But take this opportunity to stretch. The bathroom's down the hall. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll see you back at noon. So we should identify the 9 people.
And right now,
Not right on this one.
Cool.